On September 17th, we are due one of the most anticipated fights of the year, and hopefully a conclusion to the Canelo vs Golovkin saga in a trilogy-defining fight. After 24 rounds, we will now see them compete for the undisputed super middleweight titles, in which I expect both men to give everything to win. In today's tactical overview video, I'm going to take a look at the areas both men may exploit or could change for this trilogy fight. I'll look at their most recent fights and areas that could be exploited on both sides, along with my final thoughts and prediction. Will it be the Mexican warrior, or will the Kazakh king come out on top? But first up, it's important to look back at how we actually got here. Before these two became rivals, Golovkin was very much considered the boogeyman of the middleweight division, with many avoiding him at the time. No doubt due to some of the devastating knockouts and big drama shows he was putting on. Canelo, on the other hand, was fighting at light middleweight, but made the move up to face the highly regarded Miguel Cotto to defeat the former pound-for-pound star in a great display. It was from here the demand for the fight for these two began to be talked about among fans, with both barred against each other years prior. It would, however, take a few years for both men to finally come face to face in the ring in 2017, with this being regarded as a true super fight and the best versus the best, which doesn't happen very often nowadays in boxing. Golovkin looked to have dominated the fight with his excellent jab and pressure, with Canelo only showing glimpses of his incredible talent through his explosive counterpunching. The bout, however, was declared a draw, with many feeling Triple G had done enough to win, myself included. The rematch would then take place a year later in 2018, due to a failed drugs test from Alvarez. However, with the stakes and demand of this fight being so high, this rematch had to happen. The two would still get in the ring that year, with Canelo Alvarez deciding to change his whole approach by applying pressure and going toe-to-toe with the power-punching Golovkin, who instead opted to try box more and counteract the changing tactics of the Mexican and his team. The approach from Canelo would prove successful, as Alvarez would come out victorious in a majority decision to give Triple G his first taste of defeat in the pros, in what was a high-level contest and a very close fight that could have gone either way. With this fight out the way, both men have taken very different paths. Canelo, of course, has gone on to win world titles in 2 weight divisions, including becoming the undisputed champion at super middleweight, whereas Golovkin has only fought 4 times since 2018, looking older with each fight, but still clearly has much desire. Nevertheless, with Canelo suffering his second pro defeat against Bivol recently, could this be a sign of the decline of Canelo Alvarez? Triple G is still one of the most challenging opponents the Mexican has ever had, and he will be going for blood this time, in what will probably be his last chance for revenge, or as Teddy Atlas says, make the world fair.
Sometimes we make too many excuses, we do, and we try to play ourselves as victims, and we're not victims in this beautiful country. We can be anything we want to be. But sometimes, even with that, life is unfair. This is the sport, the one sport where on any given night, a kid from anywhere, from dirt floors to where he was from a country that he didn't have the rights, he didn't have money, he had nothing but poverty, he didn't have parents, he didn't have anything. But he had it in his chest, in his heart, to work hard, to get in that ring, to be ready, to be trained. And on one given night, he can have his hand raised and be called champion of the world and make life fair, make the world fair. It's the only sport that can do that. The sport is beautiful, but the administrators of the sport, they stink.
Both men showed great competitive respect in the first encounters, but due to the drug incident and war of words, both men simply do not like each other, something Alvarez has been very vocal about.
Personal for me, because he talk a lot of things, and you know, guys, that's why it's personal. He pretends to be a nice guy, but he's not. He's an asshole. That's what he is. He pretends to be a nice guy, And oh yes, I'm just looking for the fight. I'm happy, but in other place he talk a lot of shit. It is what it is. Just be a man and say what you say.
While Triple G is taking the more stoic approach in front of the press, despite his so-called spiteful or honest words in other interviews around Canelo. No doubt to try get under the skin of Alvarez. But now, let's take a look at both men tactically on how they might approach September 17th. Let's start off with the challenger, Gennady Golovkin. With Triple G now 40, he is very much considered an old man. However, despite his age and lack of fights, he has still been winning. In a boxing sense, it can be rare to see this unless you're an elite level fighter, and this is exactly what Triple G is. A man who has never hit the canvas throughout his whole career as an amateur or professional, which shows he has truly a remarkable chin and durability. He should no doubt take inspiration from the likes of George Foreman, who beat Moore at 42, Marquez, who beat Pacquiao at 38, or Ali's revenge when he faced Spinks in their second encounter. Boxers can turn back the clock sometimes, and with Gennady's experience, it's not out of the question he can pull this one off. Another aspect to consider is Golovkin is also pretty much a career middleweight, and he will be moving up to the 12 stone 7 division. What I think will actually help him in this fight is not having to worry about lowering his weight, especially when you're at the age of his. Knowing this, it may help him in his preparation by being closer to his natural weight and not having to drain himself. If we look at his first fight against Canelo, Triple G had the persona of the power punching monster that no one could survive against in the ring, whereas the Mexican at that point in time had a far more aggressive counter punching style. He would look to box in the back foot at times and wait for the right moments to strike. Golovkin was all about pressure and closing off the ring with footwork and using his power jabs to put his opponents on the ropes so he could then tee off his punches. Canelo in the first fight fell into the rhythm of how Golovkin likes to fight by trying to counterpunch at the right moments towards the end of the rounds to try grab the judge's attention. However, you could tell this approach was not working for him, and he would quickly tire, and he was constantly having to move with footwork and get on the ropes to play possum. This is an approach Triple G will have to try and apply more in the trilogy fight. He needs to try and push back the Mexican and fight at his pace at times. Otherwise, Alvarez will overwhelm and control him like he did in the second fight. Regardless, I don't see Golovkin being able to do this due to what we saw in his most recent fight. Maybe Golovkin should try to allow Canelo to overcommit himself, as this could potentially lead to counter-punching opportunities for the Kazakh. The left hook is obviously a favourite of Canelo's, and potentially a big right hand counter could be a way to catch him coming into range, if timed correctly, just as we saw in the Murata fight. Regardless, as the good old saying goes in boxing, you're only as good as your last fight. And watching that Murata fight, we got glimpses of the old Golovkin, but we also saw someone who looked very rusty and tired at times. But give him the benefit of the doubt, as it had been 400 days since his previous fight, and maybe that rest was needed. If we look at the tactics Gennady employed, he looked to use his accurate power jab and circle to the right of Murata. This could be considered a risky tactic, as you put yourself in the line of the right hand if you're not ready. You could also see Triple G was very cautious of receiving body shots and would keep his guard slightly lower to try block these punches, and much rather prefer to use footwork to get out of range, or simply look to cover up. However, in certain moments, we saw those quick bursts of energy from Golovkin, where he looked to turn back the years and throw those big powerful wide hooks and uppercuts on the inside, while also throwing a lot of overhand hooks over the top of the guard. This is definitely something he will no doubt try to throw against Canelo, as he has a guard that can be very difficult to break past, and the unpredictable nature of those overhand or looping hooks could cause hesitation for Canelo to commit. However, for me, it is whether Golovkin is able to push back Canelo in any shape or form. Gennady is great at pushing forward and unleashing shots after throwing his jab, which is the most accurate in boxing, with him landing an average of 10 per round. But Golovkin for this third fight has to have a plan B this time, as in their last fight in 2018, Canelo avoided being pushed back at all costs, where he would always try to look to retake centre ring for the majority of the fight. Personally, we also need to see Golovkin not headhunt as much and try also to discourage Canelo with the body shots, as this is what will help lead to the openings up top for him, and he will need these clear open opportunities if he wishes to knock out Alvarez. Now let's take a look at Canelo, who will very much have a big point to prove. The Mexican is still very much seen as the money man in boxing, and there's no doubt many enjoyed him losing to Bivol. However, you cannot discredit him for daring to be great moving up in weight. Nevertheless, he did still lose to a talented Russian light heavyweight in Bivol, and he cannot afford to continue the habits from this fight against Golovkin. Potentially you could blame the weight for Canelo's lack of energy at times in the fight, where he clearly struggled against the tactics of Bivol, where he looked to throw the sharp, accurate 1-2s through the guard before moving in circles out of distance to then retake centre ring and continue his attacks. This saw Canelo tire quickly and get pushed back to the ropes, which eventually gave Bivol the confidence to stand toe to toe with Canelo, knowing his power punching wouldn't be enough to stop him. For me, it was the lack of jab that was very apparent in this fight, as he opted to rely on his power punching and target the upper arm of Bivol in the hope it might dismantle him, like he did in the Callum Smith fight. Even the very best can get tactics wrong on what was a very disappointing night. These habits and tactics from Canelo need to change versus Golovkin, as he still has one of the best jabs in boxing, as I just showed you, and he can't afford to resort going back in the ropes so often, or he could be in for a big shock. Canelo, on the other hand, should take confidence from the time he did defeat Golovkin in the second fight. The reason he had much success here was the fact he took control of centre ring. His counter-punching was top notch, and just by looking at Golovkin's face after the fight, he definitely left his mark on him, like we've never seen before. This for me is the biggest difference from the first fight, was that Canelo held that centre ring and used his effective aggression for the vast majority of the fight. Whereas before, even in the Bivol fight, he would tire and look to lie back in the ropes and try and counterpunch instead, which is just simply not going to work this time. It's also evident that Canelo needs to throw his jab more, and this was something he did very well versus Golovkin in the second fight, as it also gave him the ability to feint more with his lead hand and land some huge punches. In more recent fights, it's been very much absent, and I believe he needs to bring this back. Canelo will no doubt also know Golovkin has looked very awkward receiving punches to the body ever since their last fight, and I would be shocked if Canelo doesn't try to target this to take out Golovkin once and for all. In terms of my prediction and looking at everything I've seen, including the two previous fights and their most recent bouts, I think we will once again get a very competitive fight. Personally, I think Canelo should not get drawn into looking for the knockout, or he could very well be in for a shock, and he needs to fight smart. However, he will be desperate to make a statement on September 17th. Golovkin, I believe, will make this a difficult fight, and look to use his jab and wait for Canelo to potentially outwork himself, and fight some bursts of intensity to try and knock out the Mexican. From here, it's whether he has enough left in the tank at 40, and if he can survive power shots to the body from Canelo. But I just can't look past Canelo winning this. I do think he has what it takes to turn things around and get rid of some of those bad habits he picked up. Not only that, he will be facing a slower, older Golovkin, but I do expect this once again to go the 12 rounds in another competitive clash between the two. But I do think Canelo will win more convincingly this time. But sometimes magic can happen in boxing, so never rule out Triple G. To finish off, I want to make it clear how much we should appreciate these two stepping in the ring again. The boxing world and fans complain too often about certain fights. I guess I'm more of a glass half full person, and we need to enjoy these two warriors as they fight to close off this chapter. It's not often we get a Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin going toe-to-toe. Two elite fighters that will go down in boxing history and Hall of Famers. Two legends of a sport we should truly appreciate now before they retire. And I can't wait to see them do battle on September 17th. All will be revealed very soon. Comment below and let me know your prediction for the fight. Do you think Canelo will dominate this time? Or will Golovkin shock us all and finally get that official win over his rival? This has been Jamie from Boxing Life. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate the support. And as always, I will see you in the next one.